The day had been long and exhausting. Crowds of people had followed Jesus wherever he went, hanging on every word he spoke. From morning until evening, he taught them about the kingdom of God, about love, faith, and the hope of salvation. His words were like water to the thirsty, and his miracles like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. Yet even Jesus needed rest. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, Jesus turned to his disciples and said, "Let us cross to the other side of the sea." The Sea of Galilee stretched out before them, calm and glittering in the fading light. The disciples, many of whom were experienced fishermen, nodded. This was familiar territory for them. The waters were still and the evening breeze was gentle, perfect conditions for the journey ahead. Together they helped Jesus into the small wooden boat, and soon they pushed off from the shore. The gentle sound of the oars cutting through the water filled the air as the boat glided across the sea. Jesus, weary from the day, made his way to the back of the boat. He found a cushion, laid his head down, and within moments he was fast asleep. The disciples continued to row, their movements steady and rhythmic. They spoke in hushed tones, some discussing the miracles they had witnessed earlier that day. Others gazed at the darkening horizon, lost in thought. But as night fell, the weather began to change. The soft evening breeze grew stronger, sharper. Clouds gathered overhead, blotting out the moon and stars. The once calm sea started to ripple, then churn. The disciples exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen storms on this sea before. They knew how quickly things could escalate, and escalate they did. Without warning, a fierce wind howled across the water, whipping the waves into towering walls of water. The boat rocked violently, teetering on the edge of capsizing. The disciples clung to the sides, their hearts pounding. Lightning split the sky, illuminating their terrified faces, followed by the deafening crash of thunder. "Hold the ropes!" Peter shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. Waves crashed over the boat, drenching them and flooding the deck. The small vessel groaned under the weight of the water. The disciples frantically bailed water out with their hands, but it seemed hopeless. "We're sinking!" cried one of them, his voice trembling. "We're going to drown!" Amid the chaos, a startling realization hit them. Jesus was still asleep. In the back of the boat, while the storm raged and the disciples panicked, Jesus lay undisturbed, his face peaceful. The contrast was almost surreal. "Teacher!" Peter yelled as he stumbled toward him. He grabbed Jesus by the shoulders and shook him. "Don't you care that we're about to die?" Jesus stirred, opening his eyes. His expression was calm, almost serene, as though he had woken from a pleasant dream. He sat up slowly, steadying himself against the rocking of the boat. The disciples looked at him, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. Without a word, Jesus stood and made his way to the front of the boat. The storm raged on around him, waves crashing, wind howling, lightning flashing. Yet he seemed untouched by it all. He raised his hand, his gaze steady, and spoke in a voice filled with authority. "Peace, be still." The transformation was instant. The wind stopped as if it had been silenced by a command. The waves settled, smoothing into a glass-like surface. The roaring storm was replaced by an almost deafening silence. It was as if the sea itself had bowed in submission to its creator. The disciples were stunned. They stared at Jesus, then at the sea, then back at Jesus. Their fear of the storm was replaced by a different kind of fear, a reverent awe. Jesus turned to them, his eyes gentle but questioning. "Why are you so afraid?" he asked. "Do you still have no faith?" The words hung in the air, piercing their hearts. The disciples had seen Jesus perform countless miracles, healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, even casting out demons. But this was something else entirely. He had commanded the forces of nature, and they had obeyed. "Who is this man?" one of them whispered, his voice trembling. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." The boat continued its journey across the now calm sea, the only sound being the gentle lapping of water against its sides. The disciples sat in silence, each lost in thought. They realized they were in the presence of someone far greater than they had ever imagined. Jesus wasn't just a teacher or a prophet, he was something more. This man who had calmed the storm with a word held a power they couldn't fully comprehend.